You can't win with defense, though. Ukraine must be able to strike Russia in Russia. I'm confident the Ukrainians are going to not only use the F-16s right, but change their entire way of thinking about how to fight. Russia's going to try to find those and hit them before they ever take off. Bringing F-16s in to try to just shoot down Russian airplanes that's not what's going to win the war. You got to have a coordinated plan, and then you got to execute it. The Russian air defenses are good, but they're vulnerable. The biggest problem I see for Ukraine right now is your human capital. You just don't have enough pilots, enough maintenance. I think we got to figure out how to make the F-16s, which are a very capable platform, work for you. But they take a few more maintenance people than a Gripen does.
Thank you very much for your time, General. It's a pleasure having you here today. So let's start with the F-16 topic, the topic that is really big on Ukrainian news, and I think everyone in Ukraine is expecting those jets to arrive so much. So media have previously reported that those jets would come to Ukraine this summer. What would general public see? How would they know that the F-16s are in Ukraine and are being used by Ukrainian pilots?
Well, first, Maria, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and it was a real treat to visit Ukraine. As far as the F-16s, I was really happy to see President Zelensky come out and say what he said. It's fundamentally that the F-16s are just going to be another tool in the toolkit. They're not going to change. They're not going to change the fight by themselves. And wars are fought by people, not equipment. It's going to be the Ukrainian pilots who fly them, the Ukrainian maintenance professionals who maintain them, who make those work. But how they are integrated with all the other tools that Ukraine organically has, the other tools that are given to them by allies and partners from around the world, tying all those together into a joint and integrated way of fighting to defeat Russia is what's going to matter. The Ukrainian people will eventually see the F-16s arrive, hopefully very soon, and they'll start contributing to the fight. But again, they're not going to change the fight by themselves. I think longer term, what it's going to help is it's another pathway towards being better integrated with NATO and the West, and it's a pathway to ultimately, hopefully becoming a part of NATO when time allows.
So basically, would there be any indication, or because obviously Ukrainian Air Force commanders have said that, the first ones who should see that the F-16s are in Ukraine should be, the Russian forces. They should feel, the difference. They should feel those strikes or whatever will happen next.
Yeah, I think you're going to see the added capability they're going to bring initially is I think they'll probably be used, most likely be used in the western part of the nation to help with air defense. And air defense is it's the big issue right now with all the different ways Russia is attacking cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, glide bombs, drones. The F-16 is going to be another a key player in helping negate those threats, shoot those things down. I think eventually, as you get a larger force of F-16s and the Ukrainian Air Force gets more comfortable with operating and maintaining them, and as the joint team that is planning and executing, commanding and controlling, if you will, the fight, gets an understanding of what the F-16s will do, then I think you'll see them move further east and participate in strikes and things like that. But the key to making all that happen is ultimately getting air superiority. Neither country, neither combatant, Russia or Ukraine, has air superiority right now, which is why this fight has devolved into this war of attrition. World War I style trench warfare is what you'll hear a lot of folks say. It would not be that way if one side or the other had air superiority. And what we want is Ukraine to get air superiority. Right now, there's a call for more and more air defense for Ukraine. And we've got to do that. And I think you're going to see in the NATO summit even more of a commitment from the leaders of the NATO nations to give Ukraine what it needs to defend itself. You can't win with defense, though. You can lose if you don't have it, but you're not going to win with it. You've got to go on the offensive. And to do that, you've got to get air superiority. And some of the things that are going to enable Ukraine to do that beyond the F-16s are the policy changes that we've seen slowly getting walked back. Those must happen. Ukraine must be able to strike Russia in Russia. Anything that Russia is using on Russian territory should be fair game for the Ukrainians to strike at. And we're seeing a little bit more of that. But if they can take out these S-300, S-400s that the Russians are using, both surface to surface, but just as importantly, surface to air, that prevents the Ukrainian Air Force from flying. If you can take those things out and then allow the Ukrainian Air Force to operate over their own airspace, then you'll see the airplanes you already have, the Sukhoi airplanes you have, in addition to the F-16s, be able to support your troops on the ground and take out Russian positions, take out Russian logistics hubs, et cetera, and that will be a game changer. That is an asymmetric advantage that we have, but you've got to get air superiority to do that. That will make the F-16s exponentially more effective, as well as your other fighters. In my last job in the Pentagon, I retired 1 June of 2023, but just prior to the invasion, February 24th of 2022, all the way up until the time of my retirement, I was one of the Secretary of the Air Force's designated leads on the Air Force staff to interact with the security integration group that was stood up to provide assistance to Ukraine, at the DoD level. Every service had representatives. So I sat in on those weekly meetings at the senior level and helped push things forward that U.S. European Command was getting requests from Ukraine. And so you always just want to do more. And so it's one thing to sit in the Pentagon and work on things. It's another to actually put feet on the ground in Ukraine and see how those tools are being used, seeing what else is needed to interact with the Ukrainian leadership. And so it was just an honor to visit. I just wish we could do more. I always want to do more.
We're talking about your trip to Kyiv. Can you could you please share who you met, what you talked about?
Yes,
did you feel that your message was being heard?
Yes. So the purpose of our trip, it was organized by the Ukraine Freedom Fund that was established several years ago by Mr. Andy Bain, who's a U.S. citizen who's lived in Kyiv for nearly 30 years, big supporter of all things in Ukraine. And he saw the need to fill a void that was not currently being filled by the other assistance that's provided by U.S., NATO, and other allies and partners. A lot of equipment's being provided, right? A lot of tactical level training is being provided for that equipment. But what he saw is that there's a void at the strategic level as far as mentoring and advising senior military leaders from all the services across the Ukrainian Defense Force. And so he reached out to several retired general officers from various services in the U.S. and asked if we would be able to assist to go over there and have some meetings. And so me and Lieutenant General retired Dave Deptula went as the Air Force representatives to go meet with 15 to 20 senior leaders from the Ukrainian Air Force and have discussions on operational and strategic level campaign planning and execution. How do you, at that senior level, think through the problem that you're dealing with, and how do you attack that problem and execute it, and how do you integrate that across all of your forces, not just the Air Force, but the joint force, so your Army, your Navy, et cetera. So we had a 2-day symposium with, again, about 15 to 20 of your senior-most Ukrainian Air Force leaders, and it was an outstanding dialogue, a really good back and forth. General Deptula led our discussions. He's a recognized around the world expert on air operations and air campaign planning, et cetera. And he started it off exactly right. He said, we're not here to tell you what to do because you guys are fighting, you're in the fight. We're here to let you know how we do it, the Western way of war, if you will, and things that perhaps you could apply here to be more successful. And we had a really good exchange. It led to, early on in the first day, as we were going back and forth, there were things that were being said by our Ukrainian counterparts, well, we'd like this, and we finally, I think it was by lunchtime, we said, you know what, it would be good. How about tomorrow, how about you guys, get together to the side, maybe this evening, and then come back tomorrow with what we called a Christmas list. Let's make a list of all the things you think that you need to be successful from the U.S., NATO, allied partner nations, et cetera, and then we'll discuss that all day tomorrow. So they did that, and we did, on the second day, we really dove into that list. And that included policy, material, training, all these different things. And it was really, really helpful. And we brought that list back, and we've been sharing it with key influencers here and key influencers across allied and partner nations. Again, it started off, by the way, with the number one thing that's needed is some policy relief. And I think we've seen some of that, which is really good, allowing Ukraine to strike into Russia. Another big takeaway for us from the discussions was, while we met with the Air Force leaders, and we're going to try to do this in a follow-on meeting, we would really like to have a joint session, right? Because the way to fight is jointly, right? The Air Force isn't going to win the fight on their own. The Army's not going to win it on their own. Your space capabilities, your naval capabilities. It's how you integrate all those to achieve your objectives that matters. So while we had a great dialogue with the Air Force, none of that matters if the message doesn't carry forward to the joint team that is actually leading the efforts in Ukraine. They have to understand how to integrate the Air Force with the land force, with the naval force, with the drones. Everything's got to come together to achieve a common purpose, a common objective. If you're not doing that, you're not going to be successful. So really good 2-day dialogue with your senior Air Force leaders.
Do you see some changes on the battlefield? Do you project those will happen? Do you feel like there was understanding and Ukrainians learned something?
They absolutely learned. They learned, and we learned from them, right? We learned a lot about the challenges they're facing. There are a lot of difficult challenges, not the least of which is just the size comparison, again, between Ukraine and the threat that they're up against. Cultures don't change overnight, right? Things aren't going to change overnight, but the Ukrainian leadership there was very open to what we were talking about, and I'm confident they're going to go back and have discussions with their joint partners to try to make the necessary changes to be successful. But we are committed to going back on a routine basis and having more and more discussions. I know Mr. Bain, who runs the Ukraine Freedom Fund, is excited to support that. We've just brought on a U.S. Navy admiral because we didn't have any senior Navy leaders. Mark Montgomery, a retired Navy two-star, who's a recognized expert in the maritime area, but also in the joint. And Mark and I have talked. He really wants to, like I was just mentioning, he wants to get together a joint team over there. He didn't just want to talk to the Ukrainian Navy. We got to talk to the joint leadership to try to change that culture. When I talk about changing the culture, Ukraine gained its independence in the early 90s from the Soviet Union. And so, I mean, you know that better than me. But the senior-most leaders in the Ukrainian military, therefore, were raised under a Soviet system. It's a completely different way of thinking than what we will call the Western way of war, the NATO way. You see it in the way the Russians are attacking. There is no concern for loss of life. There's no value of human life. They grab prisoners, they grab anybody they can and just throw them at the bullets coming from the Ukrainian side. And the prisoners the Ukrainians capture will tell you that it's a choice for them. They either run into Ukrainian guns, or if they turn around, they get shot by their leadership. Who does that? Thugs, vicious thugs. That's not our way. We would rather not fight. We would rather deter fights. But if you're going to fight, you want to fight smart, right? And so that requires just a different way of thinking than the Soviet model. An example is decentralized execution, all right? Centralized control, but decentralized execution is the way we phrase it. So in the Soviet system, it's a lot like a mafia, I'll say, or a gang, right? The boss decides everything, the boss micromanages everything, nobody's allowed to make decisions. It's an authoritarian way of doing business that you see in Russia, that you see in China, you see in North Korea. Everybody's afraid to make decisions on their own. If they make decisions on their own, it's wrong, they'll get their heads cut off. That's not our way. We trust our people. We trust our youngest people, our youngest non-commissioned officers, our youngest airmen. We give them command level guidance, centralized control, but then decentralized execution. So the youngest people in our force are allowed to make decisions and go forth. They understand the broad commander's intent, and they move out and they do things. It goes back to that independence, the fierce independence that I told you Ukrainians have. It's in your culture now, but it's not in your senior-most military culture because they were raised under that Soviet system. So changing that culture is important. And the younger folks were that we talk to, the more they understand that and want to act in that way, right? They want to have the ability to have the broad level guidance from the boss and then go out and execute. And the boss trusts them. The boss's job is to get them the resources they need and give them that big level guidance and then get out of the way so that they can move faster, think on their feet, and do things that are faster than the enemy can react. Because the enemy has to go back to mom or dad and ask, right? If you can move faster, think faster, make decisions faster, that's how you prevail against this larger force. So that's a big culture change, but I'm confident the Ukrainians can make that culture change. And in doing so, it's going to align them again more with NATO's way of thinking and way of doing things, so that down the road, hopefully there's a path to NATO membership.
Actually, this is something that former F-16 pilots told me, that they have more independence on the battlefield than in the air than the way they do things in Ukraine. Do you think that would be an obstacle for Ukrainians operating F-16s?
No, I don't think it'll be an obstacle because, again, I think at the lowest levels, the Ukrainians who are going to be operating these aircraft and maintaining them understand that, because it's the way they were raised, right? They weren't raised under the Soviet system. You're younger folks. They were raised to be able to make their own decisions. That carries over into how they want to fly. So that's why it's so important to have these advising sessions with the senior leaders, to get them to come around and understand that trust these younger people and let them loose, let them go, and they'll do amazing things. I think it'll take root, and it'll spread not only across the F-16s, but across, I mean, look at the innovation in your drone forces, for example. That's all younger Ukrainians who are doing that. Younger Ukrainians. So it's what makes America, what makes our Western way of life so great. It's what you see different than in authoritarian societies, right? That's where that innovation happens at the lowest levels. And that's not allowed in certain societies that have authoritarian leadership, right? So I'm confident the Ukrainians are going to not only use the F-16s right, but change their entire way of thinking about how to fight.
Speaking about F-16s, if you don't mind going back to this topic, do you feel that from what you've seen in Ukraine, in Kiev, do you feel that Ukrainians are ready? Do you feel that the pilots are ready, the infrastructure is ready, the ground personnel is ready?
You have amazingly capable pilots, and when we train pilots in the United States to fly fighters, they're either brand new pilots that came out of initial flight school and then move into like an F-16, and it takes 8 or 10 months to train them, or they're experienced pilots that were flying another fighter. Let's just say they're flying an F-15 or some other type of fighter. When we move them into an F-16, it only takes a few months. That's what we've done with your pilots. You have very experienced pilots you sent. So they already know how to fly airplanes, they already know how to fly fighters, they just need to learn how to fly an F-16. They already got all the other basics. So that's the type of training your pilots are getting, and they're going to be fine, right? They're going to get comfortable in the F-16 very quickly because they're very competent. Your maintenance personnel, it's the same, right? They're trained on. You're bringing in some new folks, right? That maybe have never worked on an airplane. For the most part, you're bringing in maintenance personnel who know how to work on fighter airplanes. It's just what's different about working on an F-16. So that'll happen quickly. My biggest fear, I guess, is on the infrastructure side. And it's not about your infrastructure, it's about the fact that Russia knows the importance of the F-16s. Even though, like I said, they're just one other tool, there's a strategic value to as soon as they can either hit one while it's sitting on the ground or shoot one down when it's in the air, and it's going to be all over the Russian press, right? So they're going to do anything and everything to find ways to try to attack those F-16s, including on the ground. And so when I say infrastructure, I'm like, where are they going to be based, and how do you defend that base? From saboteurs sneaking in and doing something, to small UASs being flown by local saboteurs, to surface-to-surface strikes or air-to-surface strikes from Russia. Russia's going to try to find those and hit them before they ever take off, and then claim success, claim victory. That's my biggest concern, and again, I think that's why you're going to see out of the summit, not directly in relation to the F-16, but just more of a commitment from NATO to air defense capabilities. But yeah, and the infrastructure piece is my biggest concern. So defending those bases, both at the local level and then from an air defense perspective, is going to be key to the early on success of the F-16s.
Let's talk about the training that Ukrainians got in Europe and here in the US. Do you think that it is enough the time that they had preparing, learning to operate the F-16s and using all the weapon systems? Do you think it's enough for them to master those systems, to be able to fly them and to use everything to the full extent that F-16 has? Yeah,
well, it's enough for them to confidently operate the F-16 from day one, all right? But any fighter pilot who's being honest will tell you never master, right? So they're going to be confident, they're going to be ready to fight from day one. But every time they fly, they're going to get better, they're going to learn. It's like anything else you do in life. If you're doing it right, you're always learning. So they're going to continue to improve. But they are absolutely going to be ready. We will not send them over there with F-16s and put them into combat if they're not ready. So they will be ready. I think like I said though, initially they'll probably be used for air defense types missions, to help shoot down drones and things, cruise missiles in the western part of the country. And then as they gain more and more confidence, and as you perhaps gain more control of your skies, I think you'll see them moving eastward and participating in strikes and such. American
media previously reported that there have been multiple obstacles and problems with training of Ukrainian pilots, and that there are some, bottlenecks in this pipeline, that other countries, other pilots from other countries have priority, that the contracts need to be fulfilled, right? So Ukrainians are saying that maybe there is something that could be done. Do you think that any decision could be made on the Pentagon, White House level, or maybe in the Air Force to make it happen, to help accommodate those Ukrainian pilots who are probably ready, but there are not enough spaces for them in training centers?
The F-16 is operated worldwide by a lot of allies and partners, and we've had a bottleneck in the pipeline for training for a long time, and the U.S. Air Force is several thousand pilots short, and a large component of that is F-16s, because the F-16s are the largest part of our fighter force. So it is a known problem that the pipeline is backed up. That said, Ukraine is at war, and so I think we're doing everything we can to prioritize the Ukrainian pilots, Ukrainian training, not just here, but in Europe, because a lot of our partners in Europe flew F-16s or are still flying them. Many are transitioning to the F-35, which is how we're getting the F-16s for Ukraine, and they're helping out. So I think there's a concerted effort to do everything we can to move the Ukrainian training to the front of the line, while still ensuring we serve the interest of our other allies and partners flying F-16s and training enough to keep the U.S. Air Force sustained. I bring that up because you guys are in a shooting war in Ukraine, right? And we need to get these F-16s to you. But we also need to recognize that what Putin's doing here is part of a much larger picture worldwide. And the folks who understand that are the ones who are most behind supporting Ukraine. The folks who don't are the ones who want to back away and be isolationist and things like that. The folks who understand the bigger picture understand that it's not just Putin we're up against here. It's other revisionists such as Xi Jinping, such as Kim Jong-un, such as the Iranians, who fundamentally want to change the Western world order that has provided peace and prosperity that has never been seen in the history of humanity, greater peace and prosperity since the end of World War II, when that order was put in place, until today. And so they want to change that for some reason. And so I bring that up because we've got to balance getting capabilities to other countries around the world who are deterring these other like-minded bad guys, if you will. So I can't sit here and say that we can't do more. We probably could do more. I'd have to get into like really specific details to analyze it, to see if we could move Ukrainians faster, forward in the maintenance, in the pilot training. But at the end of the day, it's a tough balancing act for the U.S. and our allies, because this is a strategic, it's a around the world fight. Example, Taiwan flies F-16s, right? We train pilots for Taiwan. Xi Jinping's watching what's going on in Ukraine. And if Putin succeeds, it's probably going to, make him lean more likely to trying to take Taiwan by force. So we got to make sure Taiwan has what they need. So there's a bigger picture here, but I'm hopeful that we're doing all we can to accelerate the training, for the Ukrainians and get those F-16s fielded as quickly as possible.
Speaking of some shortage of trained Ukrainian pilots compared to those capabilities that Ukraine might probably get by the end of the year, do you think that some foreign retired pilots flying for Ukraine or training or being there on the ground to help Ukrainians in any sort of way is one of the solutions?
Well, let's hit the ground piece first. A larger picture, I think contractors from the U.S. or other countries on the ground is either happening or is going to happen, right? I think that's a good thing. If you look at like Patriot missile batteries, for example, it would be much better to have experts on the ground in Ukraine to maintain and repair those, so you don't have to ship systems out and back in. It'll just get them back in the fight quicker. So I think if you don't see it now, you're going to see it in the near future. I think the U.S. and partners are committed to that, and the line they're balancing there is not having U.S. and NATO men and women, servicemen and women in particular, in combat fighting against Russia, because that is a red line. But I think contractors on the ground doing maintenance on F-16s, on Patriots, things like that, I think we'll definitely see that, and I think that's a good thing, right? It keeps those systems in the fight on a more routine basis. As far as flying F-16s and operating them, I haven't heard anything along those lines. I certainly don't. I see it as a red line to put actual military members, uniformed military members from other nations in there. I don't think you'll see that from the United States or NATO or other partners. I don't know if there's any ruling against individual citizens who are retired or ex-military who want to go do that on a contractor basis. That's one to debate, I guess, but I guess we'll see where that goes. I hadn't heard that one either.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Dan Hampton told me this during our interviews last year a few times, that he's ready, he's willing to go. And
I'm sure there are a lot of people who would like to. I know a lot of friends, for example, who were A-10 pilots, right when the initial invasion happened, when the Russian convoys were lined up on the roads, boy, they would like to be there in their A-10 right now. I would have liked to have been there in an A-10 at that point, to be honest. We could have ended that thing pretty quickly. But anyway, yeah, there are a lot of people who are ready and willing, but it's about the legal and policy hurdles that you got to overcome to make that happen.
Do you think it's possible?
Again, I think independent citizens, as long as it's deemed legal, that's possible. But it can't be anybody affiliated with a military of either the United States or a NATO ally, because again, that gives Putin the green light now to say NATO is directly in combat with Russia, and therefore we will attack NATO, and we don't want to do that.
Do you think fighter pilots like that would help change the situation dramatically? Well,
again, the F-16 is a tool, the Patriot's a tool. All these tools have to be integrated into a campaign plan that is executed to defeat Russia. So having more experienced people there to help the Ukrainians will always be a good thing. Will it be a game changer? I don't think it's as much of a game changer as, again, bringing all what really needs to happen, I think, in Ukraine is to bring all the disparate efforts. There's a lot of great efforts that are going on individual. Coordinate them in a joint campaign to first gain and maintain air superiority, and then use that to roll back Russia. All right, that's what's got to happen in my opinion right now. All the small tactical level efforts have to be integrated at the joint level. There's got to be a campaign design, and that campaign's got to be executed violently to roll back what Russia's doing. So again, F-16s will help with that, experienced operators will help with that, contract maintenance will help with that, but at the end of the day, it's that senior level work that's got to be done that I don't see happening right now, and that's what we're trying to help advise with.
Some might argue that the Patriot systems had become a game changer because they were the first to help Ukrainians shoot down the ballistic missiles,
right,
or Ukrainian Russian planes, Russian warplanes. You don't think that the F-16s might have this huge impact and those expectations are overblown? They're
part of the interwoven capabilities. You got to put it all together. The F-16s by themselves are not, they're not going to be able to make the change. They've got to be used in a fashion that is coordinated with other capabilities. I'll give you an example. If you have somebody that's, let's say, launching some balloons that are radar reflective, that look like airplanes, that cause the Russians to shoot air-to-air missiles or surface-to-air missiles at them. So you're launching cheap balloons, and the Russians are wasting missiles and shooting at them. That's a wonderful thing. But if that's all you're doing, if it's not part of an effort that, hey, maybe you launch the balloons, the Russians shoot their missiles, then while they're reloading, you bring in the F-16s and you bomb the site, right? Or the Russians shoot their air-to-air missiles, and then they're out of missiles, and the F-16s come swooping in behind the balloons and shoot down the Russians. It's not the F-16s per se. It's a coordinated effort between all the services, the special operations, the land force, the air force, to achieve an objective that is going to matter. Bringing F-16s in to try to just shoot down Russian airplanes that's not what's going to win the war. You got to have a coordinated plan, and then you got to execute it to achieve specific objectives. And the first objective needs to be air superiority. You get that by taking out their surface-to-air missiles and then by taking out their air-to-air airplanes. And you can do that, I believe, with the tools that Ukraine has if they're all, again, pulled together, command and controlled, and executed in that coordinated fashion.
What do you think about Russian air defense? Do you think, well, Vipers are created to help suppress air defense, right?
Yes.
So do you think that Russian air defense systems are as good as they try to portray it?
I think they're good, but they're vulnerable, right? And the wonderful thing, I think Ukrainian intelligence is very, very capable. I think you know where the Russian surface-to-air missiles are. So now let's build a plan of what we call counter-IADS, Counter-Integrated Air and Missile Defense System plan to take out those defenses, using the ATACMS missiles we've given you, using the F-16s, using things like the balloons, using small drones. How do you pull all that together in a coordinated campaign to, in a certain area, let's just pick a small area. Hey, we're going to take out all their surface-to-air missiles here. Then guess what? Then all your fighters can fly with freedom. If Russian fighters come up, you shoot them down. Meanwhile, your fighters are now supporting your land forces in that area. Then we widen it out to another area, widen it out to another area. The Russian air defenses are good, but they're vulnerable. They're especially vulnerable to a thinking, wise adversary who uses all their tools in a coordinated fashion to take them out. But sitting back and playing defense isn't going to work, and that's we've kind of left Ukraine in a position where they had to just play defense. And I think you're seeing the policy open up, the tools available now to where you can go on offense. You've got to go on offense, take out their integrated air defenses. Once you do that, it'll open up everything else for your entire joint force.
What do you think about the French Mirage 2000, Swedish Gripen? Do you think those jets could help Ukrainian Air Force integrated with the F-16s, or should Ukraine rather wait and integrate those Western jets step by step?
Those are both very capable systems, both the Mirage and the Gripen, and from amazing partners from Sweden and France. The biggest problem I see for Ukraine right now is your human capital. You just don't have enough pilots, enough maintenance. And so the hesitation I would have with introducing all of these is it's different logistics chains, right? Different systems that you got to learn how to operate, maintain, et cetera. So I think you got to pick one horse right now and ride it. Personally, I think the Gripen is, this Chuck Corcoran's personal opinion, was the best option for you, but I don't know how many of them are available. I say that because Sweden has built a capability in the Gripen that was designed for the exact kind of fight that you're in. You know, they are a Russian neighbor. They worry about Russia invaded them. They built something that can very easily be maintained and turned around from sortie to sortie. They practice landing on roads, refueling and rearming with small teams and taking off again. So the whole country of Sweden has bought into this concept. F-16s weren't built for that. Mirage 2000s weren't built for that. So a much smaller team that can land anywhere, quickly refuel, quickly rearm, take off. Much harder target for Russia. Therefore, you're getting more capability out of it. So if I were king, I would have tried to get you those and a lot of them early on. We are on the path for F-16s now, so I think we got to figure out how to make the F-16s, which are a very capable platform, work for you. But they take a few more maintenance people than a Gripen does, and they're not built to land on roads, they're built to land on runways. So where are these fixed bases? How do we defend these fixed bases like we talked about earlier? And Mirage 2000 is similar in that respect as far as the maintenance and the basing, et cetera. So right now I think stick with one because the amount of human capital you have as far as pilots and maintenance is the best option.
Do you think right now the Allies are doing enough for Ukraine to win?
I think more can always be done. More can always be done. It's sad to see this war of attrition that's taking place. And if it continues to be a war of attrition, the larger side is always going to win in a war of attrition. History shows us that. In reality, the larger side is Ukraine plus all the supporters. So if the supporters can put more forward and change the dynamic of the fight, get out of the war of attrition by, like I said, getting air superiority for Ukraine and then letting them use that to take back their territory, I think you'll see a pathway to victory for Ukraine.
Thank you very much, General. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Maria.
Appreciate it.